Marcus Chun pushed his cleaning cart down the sterile corridors of the Galactic Youth Integration Facility, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished metal floors. The facility housed orphaned children from dozens of different species across the galaxy, all victims of wars, natural disasters, or simple abandonment. At 62 years old, Marcus had been working as a janitor here for 3 years, ever since Earth joined the Galactic Council, and humans began taking positions throughout known space. The facility was massive, spanning several kilometers, and housing nearly 10,000 children. Most staff members were aliens from various species, but Marcus had noticed something troubling during his time here. While the facility provided adequate food, shelter, and education, there was a cold efficiency to everything. The children were processed, categorized, and housed according to their species and developmental stages, but there was little warmth or individual attention. Marcus had grown up in foster care himself back on Earth. He recognized the signs of institutional neglect, even when basic needs were met. These children had the same hollow look in their eyes that he remembered from his own childhood, regardless of whether they had scales, fur, tentacles, or crystalline skin. The alien staff meant well, but they approached childcare like a scientific problem to be solved rather than understanding that children needed more than just physical sustenance. They needed hope, wonder, and someone who cared about their individual dreams and fears. As Marcus cleaned the recreation area, he watched a group of young Zephyrians playing with basic geometric blocks. Their translucent blue skin flickered with bioluminescent patterns that indicated their emotional states. Even without understanding their language, Marcus could see they were sad. Their patterns were dim and slow, like dying stars. Nearby, 3 croaking children sat together, their reptilian features showing the same listless expression. One absently scratched the floor with her claws, making small scratching sounds that reminded Marcus of a cat trying to get attention. A small Veldorian boy with moth-like wings sat alone, his antennae drooping as he stared at a picture book written in a language he clearly didn't understand. Marcus had been watching these children for months, learning their routines, their preferences, and their personalities. The facility's staff rotated shifts and rarely spent individual time with any single child. But Marcus was here every day, cleaning the same areas, seeing the same faces. That evening, as Marcus finished his rounds, he noticed something unusual in one of the common areas. A group of about 20 children from various species had gathered around a large table. They had somehow acquired paper and writing implements, and they appeared to be working on some kind of collaborative project. Marcus approached slowly, not wanting to disturb them. As he got closer, he could see they were writing lists. The handwriting varied wildly, some in elegant alien scripts, others in crude scratches that looked like a child's first attempts at forming letters. Some lists had small drawings alongside the text. A young Quillen girl with iridescent feathers noticed Marcus watching. She had been here for almost 2 years, ever since her homeworld was destroyed by a solar flare. Her name was Zira, and she was one of the few children who had learned basic galactic standard well enough to communicate with most species. "Mr. Marcus," she chirped, her voice carrying the musical quality common to her species. "We are making wish lists for Santa Claus." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Santa Claus? How do you know about Santa Claus?" Another child, a Terrasian boy with 4 arms and skin that changed color with his emotions, held up a datapad. "We found stories in the cultural database about the human tradition of Santa Claus who brings gifts to children who have been good." Marcus sat down in one of the child-sized chairs, his knees nearly reaching his chin. "You've been researching human traditions?" Zira nodded enthusiastically. "We research many cultures, but Santa Claus seems nice. He cares about what children want, not just what they need." The simple statement hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. These children, abandoned and institutionalized, had somehow found hope in a human fairy tale because it represented the one thing missing from their lives, someone who cared about their wants, not just their survival. "Can you tell me about your wish lists?" Marcus asked gently. The children eagerly began sharing their hopes and dreams. Zira wanted musical instruments because Quillins communicated partially through song, and she missed the melodic conversations of her people. The Terracian boy, whose name was Kohler, wanted art supplies because his species expressed emotions through color patterns on their skin, and he longed to create permanent art that captured those feelings. A shy Vorthan girl with crystalline skin that refracted light in beautiful patterns wanted seeds and soil. Her people were natural gardeners, and she dreamed of growing plants from her homeworld. A young Blexen boy with fur that changed texture based on temperature wanted warm blankets and soft materials. As a species came from a desert world, and the facility's climate control didn't account for their need for warmth variation. As Marcus listened to each child, he realized that their wishes weren't for expensive toys or impossible dreams. They wanted simple things that connected them to their heritage, their nature, or their individual personalities. They wanted to feel like individuals rather than just another refugee to be processed and housed. The most heartbreaking wish came from a small Andromedan child who couldn't have been more than 5 in human equivalent years. His species communicated through bioluminescent patterns, but he had been born with a genetic defect that made his natural light very dim. He had drawn a picture of himself glowing brightly and had somehow learned enough written language to spell out, "Light up like family." Marcus spent the next hour listening to dozens of children share their wishes. Some wanted books in their native languages. Others wanted traditional foods from their homeworlds. Many simply wanted items that would help them practice the customs and traditions of their people. As the children began to disperse for the evening sleep cycle, Zira approached Marcus with the completed lists. "We know Santa Claus is not real," she said quietly, "but it felt good to write down our wishes, to imagine that someone might care enough to make them come true." Marcus took the carefully written lists, feeling their weight beyond the simple paper and ink. "What if I told you that Santa Claus might be more real than you think?" Zira's feathers ruffled with curiosity, a sign of intense interest in her species. "What do you mean? Santa Claus isn't about one magical person," Marcus explained. "He's about the idea that people can choose to bring joy to others, especially children. Anyone can be Santa Claus if they decide to care about making someone else's dreams come true." The young Quillin girl studied Marcus with ancient-looking eyes. "Are you going to be our Santa Claus, Mr. Marcus?" Marcus looked down at the wish lists in his hands, thinking about his own childhood spent in institutions where no one had time to care about individual dreams. He thought about his modest savings, accumulated over years of simple living. He thought about the vast network of humans now spread across the galaxy, many of whom had grown up with the same Santa Claus stories these children had discovered. "I'm going to try," he said simply. That night, Marcus sat in his small quarters, carefully reading through every wish list. He organized them by what might be possible to acquire, what would require special ordering, and what might need creative solutions. Some items would be easy to find through standard commercial channels. Others would require reaching out to cultural preservation societies or specialty craftspeople from various homeworlds. Marcus began composing messages to human communities throughout the galaxy. He explained the situation at the facility and attached scanned copies of the children's wish lists. He wasn't asking for charity exactly, but rather inviting others to participate in bringing a little magic to children who had seen too little of it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Marcus's communication device was flooded with replies from humans on mining stations, research outposts, merchant vessels, and colony worlds. They offered to help locate items, provide funding, and even coordinate delivery. Dr. Sarah Walsh, a xenobiologist working on a research station near the Quillin homeworld ruins, was particularly moved by Zira's request for musical instruments. She had been studying Quillin cultural artifacts and had access to traditional instruments that had been preserved in research archives. Captain Rodriguez of the merchant vessel New Horizon offered to use his trade routes to locate specific food items requested by various children. His ship regularly visited worlds throughout the sector, and he could easily acquire specialty items that weren't available through standard supply chains. A group of human colonists on Kepler Station had established a cultural preservation project where they worked with refugee communities to maintain traditional crafts and practices. They were excited to help create or locate items that would help the orphaned children connect with their heritage. As Marcus coordinated these efforts over the following weeks, he realized something remarkable was happening. The humans throughout the galaxy weren't just helping because he had asked. They were genuinely excited to participate in something that brought joy to children, regardless of species. The Santa Claus tradition, at its core, resonated with something fundamental in human nature. Marcus also began to notice changes in the alien staff at the facility. Dr. Kelvins, the Rigelian administrator, initially questioned Marcus about the unusual amount of personal communication he was receiving. When Marcus explained the project, Dr. Kelvins was skeptical but curious. This Santa Claus concept, Dr. Kelvins said, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he processed the information. It serves no evolutionary advantage. The gift giver receives no material benefit from the exchange. That's exactly the point, Marcus replied. Sometimes the best things we do are the ones that serve no practical purpose except making someone else happy. Dr. Kelvin seemed genuinely puzzled by this concept, but Marcus noticed him paying more attention to individual children in the following days. The Rigelian administrator began asking questions about specific children's preferences and behaviors, something he had never done before. As the delivery date approached, Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had managed to acquire almost everything on the children's wish lists, thanks to the incredible network of humans who had rallied to help. Some items had required creative substitutions or innovative solutions, but every child would receive something that addressed their specific wish. The Vorthan girl who wanted seeds and soil would receive a hydroponic growing kit along with carefully preserved seeds from her homeworld, provided by a botanical research station. The Andromedan boy with dim bioluminescence would receive a specially designed bioenhancement suit that would amplify his natural light patterns, created by human engineers working with Andromedan refugees on a colony world. Marcus had also acquired traditional foods, clothing, musical instruments, art supplies, books, and dozens of other items that would help these children feel connected to their individual identities and cultures. But beyond the material gifts, Marcus realized that something more significant was happening. The process of researching each child's background, culture, and individual personality had given him a deeper understanding of who they were as individuals. He had learned their names, their stories, and their unique qualities. More importantly, the children had begun to notice that someone was paying attention to their individual needs and desires. They started approaching Marcus during his cleaning rounds, sharing stories about their homeworlds, their families, and their hopes for the future. The facility was beginning to feel less like an institution and more like a community, one child at a time. 3 weeks after collecting the wish lists, Marcus stood in the facility's largest recreation hall at dawn, surrounded by carefully wrapped packages of every imaginable shape and size. The human merchant vessels, research ships, and colony transports had worked together to coordinate deliveries, creating what appeared to be a miracle of logistics across dozens of star systems. The packages were wrapped in colorful materials that Marcus had requested specifically. Different species responded to different visual stimuli, and he wanted each child to experience the excitement of anticipation that came with mysterious, beautiful packages. Some were wrapped in shimmering silver that would appeal to crystalline species, others in rich earth tones for those who came from forest worlds, and still others in bold, bright colors for species that communicated through visual displays. Dr. Kelvins arrived early and stopped short when he saw the massive collection of gifts. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of confusion in Rigelians. "Marcus, what is the meaning of this accumulation of objects?" "Today is Christmas Day, according to the human calendar," Marcus explained, arranging the final packages. "It's the day when Santa Claus traditionally brings gifts to children. But you're Santa Claus in this scenario? Dr. Kelvins asked, his logical mind trying to categorize the situation. Marcus smiled. Today, anyone who chooses to bring joy to a child is Santa Claus. That includes you if you wanted to. Dr. Kelvins studied the packages with growing interest. These items serve individual preferences rather than general needs. Exactly. Each gift was chosen specifically for one child, based on their personality, their culture, and their individual wishes. The Regelian administrator walked slowly among the packages, reading the names written on each one. You have learned the personal designation and cultural background of 847 children in this facility. Marcus paused in his arranging. Actually, all 2,341 children currently housed here, but only 847 wrote wish lists. I have small gifts for the others too, but I focused on the children who took the initiative to express their hopes. Dr. Kelvin's skin shifted to a pale blue color, which Marcus had learned indicated deep thought in Rigelians. This required significant time investment and resource allocation. It required caring about them as individuals, Marcus corrected gently. When the children began arriving for their morning meal, they stopped in amazement at the sight of the gift-filled recreation hall. Word spread quickly through the facility, and soon hundreds of young beings from dozens of species were gathered around the edges of the room, chattering in multiple languages and creating a symphony of excited sounds. Marcus had prepared a simple explanation in basic galactic standard, which most of the children could understand at least partially. Yesterday, you were all children who had written wish lists for Santa Claus. Today, Santa Claus has come to visit. Zira, the young Quillen girl, flew forward on her iridescent wings, her feathers shimmering with excitement. You really did it? You became Santa Claus for us. We all did, Marcus said, gesturing to include Dr. Kelvins and the other staff members who had gathered to watch. Santa Claus is anyone who chooses to make children's dreams come true. Marcus began calling names, and children stepped forward to receive their gifts. Each child's reaction was unique and deeply moving. When Zira unwrapped her traditional Quillen song pipes, she immediately began playing a melody that filled the room with haunting, beautiful music. Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to bright gold and silver, indicating pure joy. Kohler, the four-armed Terrasian boy, received a complete set of bioresponsive art supplies that would change color based on his emotional state and allow him to create permanent artwork that captured the color patterns of his skin. He immediately began painting on a provided canvas, his excitement causing his skin to cycle through brilliant purples and blues that transferred to his brush strokes. The shy Vorthan girl, whose name was Krista, carefully unwrapped her hydroponic garden kit and seed collection. Her crystalline skin began refracting light in complex patterns that created tiny rainbows throughout the room. She held up a single seed from her home world and whispered something in her native language that made the other Vorthan children gasp with amazement. But it was a reaction of the small Andromedan boy that brought tears to Marcus's eyes. When the child activated his bioenhancement suit, his natural bioluminescence amplified into brilliant patterns of light that danced across his skin. For the first time since arriving at the facility, he could communicate in his species' natural visual language. The other Andromedan children immediately surrounded him, and they began an animated conversation in flowing patterns of light. As each child received their gift, something unexpected began happening. The children who had already opened their presents started helping Marcus distribute gifts to others. They carefully carried packages to children who were too shy to come forward, and they helped translate Marcus's explanations into languages and communication methods he couldn't manage alone. Zira used her musical abilities to create welcoming melodies for children from different cultures. Kohler painted temporary color patterns on children whose species communicated through visual displays, helping them understand what was happening. The Vorthan children created small light displays to guide children with poor eyesight toward their gifts. Dr. Kelvins watched this spontaneous cooperation with growing fascination. The children are engaging in reciprocal altruistic behavior, he observed to Marcus. They are helping others despite having just received their own desired objects. That's the real magic of Christmas, Marcus explained. When people experience generosity, they naturally want to share it with others. A young Hexarian child with tentacles instead of arms had wished for books in his native script. When he unwrapped a collection of traditional Hexarian stories, he immediately began reading aloud to a group of younger children from various species. Even though most couldn't understand the words, they were captivated by his animated reading style and the obvious love he had for the stories. 3 small draconian children had wished for traditional fire crystals used in their species' coming-of-age ceremonies. When they received carefully synthesized versions that could produce safe, colorful flames, they began demonstrating traditional draconian fire dances for the other children. Their joy in sharing their culture was infectious, and soon children from other species were attempting to mimic the graceful movements. The gift-opening process took over 3 hours, but no child grew impatient or bored. They were all invested in seeing each other's reactions and learning about the different cultures represented in the facility. Children who had barely interacted before were now playing together with shared toys and exploring each other's traditional foods. Marcus noticed that several alien staff members had quietly joined the celebration. Nurse Valdine, a centaurian with healing abilities, was helping children who had received complex gifts figure out how to use them properly. Counselor THYSS, a telepathic betazoid who worked with children suffering from trauma, was facilitating conversations between children who spoke different languages by providing mental translation. Even Maintenance Chief Gorlock, a gruff Klingon who rarely interacted with the children, was showing a group of young engineers from various species how to assemble a complex building set that one child had received. As the morning progressed, Dr. Kelvins approached Marcus with an expression of wonder on his usually stoic face. I have observed something unprecedented in my 15 years of institutional childcare, he said quietly. These children are exhibiting behaviors I have never documented before. What kind of behaviors? Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew. Spontaneous cooperation across species barriers, voluntary sharing of resources, expressions of gratitude that appear genuine rather than learned social responses. Most significantly, they're demonstrating individual personality traits that were previously suppressed by institutional protocols. Marcus watched as a group of children from 6 different species worked together to build an elaborate structure using various building toys they had received. They were communicating through a mixture of words, gestures, drawings, and even musical tones, somehow managing to collaborate despite vast differences in their communication methods. Children are naturally social and creative, Marcus said. They just needed to feel valued as individuals before they could fully express those qualities. A small commotion near one corner of the room caught their attention. A young Sumerian child, whose species was known for being extremely shy and rarely speaking, had received a traditional storytelling cube from her homeworld. The device projected holographic images while telling stories in the Sumerian language. She had activated it, and dozens of children were gathered around, completely mesmerized by the beautiful alien fairy tales being projected in 3-dimensional light. The shy child was carefully explaining parts of the story to children who asked questions, speaking more words than she had uttered in her entire time at the facility. Her confidence grew with each question, and by the end of the first story, she was animatedly describing the customs and mythology of her people to a fascinated audience. She has not spoken to facility staff in 8 months, Dr. Kelvins noted with amazement. We assumed she was selectively mute due to trauma. She just needed something that made her feel proud of who she was, Marcus replied. As the day continued, the children organized themselves into informal groups based on shared interests rather than species. A multi-species art corner emerged where children experimented with each other's traditional creative tools. A music area formed where young beings with different auditory capabilities explored the sounds and rhythms of various cultures. A storytelling circle developed where children took turns sharing legends and myths from their homeworlds. A building and engineering zone appeared where methodical, technically minded children from various species collaborated on increasingly complex construction projects. But perhaps most importantly, many children simply sat in small, mixed groups, quietly enjoying each other's company while exploring their individual gifts. The facility's usual segregation by species and age had completely dissolved in favor of natural social groupings based on personality and interests. Late in the afternoon, as the excitement began to wind down, Zira approached Marcus with several other children who had written wish lists. They were carrying something together, clearly collaborating on a surprise. "Mr. Marcus," Zira announced formally, "we have something for Santa Claus." The group of children presented Marcus with a carefully crafted item that took his breath away. It was a traditional human Christmas ornament, but created in the artistic styles of all their different species. Quillen feathers formed delicate patterns. Terracian color-changing materials created shifting hues. Vorthan crystal work added sparkling elements. And children from a dozen other species had contributed materials and techniques from their cultures. "We researched human Christmas traditions more carefully," explained Kohler, his forearms gesturing expressively as his skin showed warm, grateful colors. "We learned that Santa Claus also receives gifts sometimes. This is our gift to thank you for caring about our individual dreams." Marcus held the ornament carefully, feeling the weight of gratitude and love that had gone into its creation. "This is the most beautiful Christmas ornament I've ever seen," he said honestly. "But you gave me an even greater gift today." "What gift?" asked Krista, her crystal skin refracting the room's lights in curious patterns. "You showed me what happens when children are treated as individuals rather than just members of groups. You reminded me why it's important to care about each person's unique dreams and hopes." Dr. Kelvins had been quietly observing this exchange, and he stepped forward with an expression Marcus had never seen on the Regellian's face before. "Marcus, I would like to discuss implementing permanent changes to our childcare protocols based on today's observations." The afternoon had transformed not just the children, but the entire facility's understanding of what these young beings needed to thrive. 6 months after Christmas Day, the Galactic Youth Integration Facility had transformed beyond recognition. Dr. Kelvins had worked with Marcus to implement what they now called the Individual Care Protocol, fundamentally changing how the institution approached childcare for orphaned alien children. Marcus no longer worked as just a janitor. His official title was now Cultural Liaison and Individual Development Coordinator, though the children still called him Mr. Marcus. His small office was filled with cultural artifacts, communication devices linking him to human communities across the galaxy, and detailed files on every child in the facility. The most visible change was in the facility's layout itself. The sterile, species-segregated dormitories had been replaced with mixed-species living areas organized around shared interests and compatible personalities rather than biological similarities. Children chose their own living groups based on friendships and common activities. Zira had become something of a musical ambassador for the facility. Her quarters were now shared with Kelvin, a young human refugee whose parents had died in a mining accident, and Throx, a Gorman child whose species communicated through harmonic vibrations. The three children had formed an unlikely musical trio, creating songs that blended Quillen melodic traditions with human lyrics and Gorman rhythmic patterns. Their morning concerts had become a beloved facility tradition, with children gathering in the common areas to listen to songs performed in multiple languages and communication styles simultaneously. The music seemed to transcend species barriers in ways that traditional integration programs never could. Kohler had established what the children called the Rainbow Room, where he taught other children to express emotions through color and visual art. His four-armed physique allowed him to demonstrate complex painting techniques, while his color-changing skin provided real-time examples of how emotions could be translated into visual art. Children from species that communicated through bioluminescence, skin color changes, or crystal light refraction all found common ground in Kohler's art workshops. The shy Vorthen girl, Krista, had become the facility's head gardener. Her hydroponic growing systems had expanded into a full cultural botanical center where children could grow plants from their homeworlds and learn about the agricultural traditions of dozens of different species. The facility's nutrition center now incorporated fresh foods that helped children maintain connections to their cultural heritage. But the most remarkable transformation had occurred in the small Andromedan boy, whose name was Flux. With his bioenhancement suit allowing him to communicate properly for the first time since arriving at the facility, his personality had emerged as naturally brilliant and curious. He had become fascinated with engineering and had collaborated with human engineers via long-distance communication to design improvements for various bioenhancement technologies. Marcus received a priority communication one morning from Admiral Chun of the Earth Defense Fleet. The message was marked as both official and personal, which immediately caught Marcus's attention since Admiral Chun was his younger brother. Marcus, David Chin's image appeared on the communication screen. I need to discuss something important with you. The Galactic Council has been receiving reports about the changes at your facility, and they want to meet with you. Marcus felt a sudden anxiety. Are we in trouble? Did we violate some regulation with the individual care protocol? David's expression was serious, but not concerned. On the contrary, 3 different council species have formally requested that you present your methods to the full Galactic Assembly. The Rigelians want to implement your protocols across all their institutional facilities. The Centaurians are interested in adapting your approach for their medical treatment centers. Even the Vulcans have expressed curiosity about what they call the emotional integration methodology. This was unprecedented. The Galactic Council typically took decades to consider changes to established institutional protocols, and individual facilities were rarely asked to address the full assembly. What exactly are they interested in? Marcus asked. Statistical analysis of your facility shows remarkable improvements in psychological development, social integration, educational achievement, and successful placement in permanent homes. But more than that, the children from your facility who have been placed in foster or adoptive families are demonstrating unprecedented adaptation rates and emotional stability. Marcus thought about the dozens of children who had found permanent homes over the past 6 months. The individual care protocol had made them more confident, more socially skilled, and better able to articulate their needs and preferences to potential families. Children who understood and valued their own cultural heritage were also better equipped to form healthy relationships with families from other species. There's something else, David continued. Several species have started referring to what you're doing as the human approach to childcare. They're beginning to see individual emotional attention as a specifically human contribution to galactic society. This observation troubled Marcus. It shouldn't be uniquely human. Any species should be able to understand that children need individual attention and cultural connection. Maybe, David said thoughtfully, but you've demonstrated it systematically and effectively. The question is whether you're willing to share your methods with the entire galaxy. After the communication ended, Marcus spent the afternoon walking through the facility, observing the children and staff in their daily routines. The changes over the past 6 months have been gradual, but profound. In the educational sector, children no longer learned in species-segregated groups. Instead, they formed study clusters based on their individual learning styles and interests. Flux worked with a group of technically minded children from various species on advanced engineering problems. Zira led a music and language group where children learned about communication through rhythm and melody. A young Calvarian girl named Sage, whose species was known for analytical thinking, had formed a philosophy discussion group with children from species that approached logical reasoning in different ways. Their debates about ethics, consciousness, and the nature of existence had become so sophisticated that several alien staff members regularly attended their sessions. The facility's counseling program had also evolved dramatically. Instead of treating trauma and adjustment issues as problems to be solved, the staff now helped children understand their experiences as part of their individual stories. Children learned to process their losses while maintaining pride in their heritage and hope for their futures. Marcus found Dr. Kelvins in his office, reviewing statistical reports with an expression of deep satisfaction. The Rigelian had become Marcus's closest collaborator in developing and refining the individual care protocol. The Galactic Council wants me to present our methods to the full assembly, Marcus told him. Dr. Kelvin's skin shifted to a warm golden color, indicating pleasure and excitement. This is optimal. Our success rates justify galactic implementation. Are you concerned about scaling up? What we do here works because we know each child individually. How do you maintain that personal approach across millions of institutionalized children throughout the galaxy? Dr. Kelvins activated his data display, showing detailed charts and analysis. I've been studying this question extensively. The key factor is not the specific interventions we implement, but rather the underlying philosophy of treating each child as a unique individual deserving of personalized attention. The Rigelian pulled up comparative data from other facilities. Most institutional childcare focuses on efficient processing of large numbers of children. Staff ratios are calculated based on minimum supervision requirements. Educational programming is standardized for easy implementation. Cultural activities are limited to broad ethnic celebrations rather than individual heritage exploration. Marcus studied the data, seeing the clear patterns. So we're not actually doing anything that requires special resources or impossible staff ratios. We're just prioritizing different outcomes. Precisely. Traditional institutional care prioritizes economic efficiency and standardized development markers. Our approach prioritizes individual psychological development and cultural integration. The economic costs are nearly identical, but the outcomes are dramatically superior. That evening, Marcus called a general assembly for all facility residents and staff. The main auditorium, which had once been used only for mandatory lectures and administrative announcements, was now a vibrant community gathering space decorated with artwork and cultural displays created by the children. Nearly 3,000 beings filled the auditorium, representing dozens of species and age ranges. The older children had naturally assumed leadership roles in helping younger ones understand facility operations and social expectations. The staff now included volunteers from among the older residents, creating a true community rather than an institutional hierarchy. I've been asked to share our methods with the Galactic Council, Marcus announced. Before I decide whether to accept, I want to know what all of you think about the changes we've made here. Flux, the young Andromedan, activated his bioenhancement suit to full brightness and began speaking in the flowing light patterns of his species. Several other Andromedan children translated for the audience. He says that before the individual care protocol, he felt like a broken piece of equipment that couldn't function properly, one translator explained. Now he feels like a complete person who happens to need technological assistance to communicate effectively. Throx, the Gorman child who worked with Zira in the musical trio, created a complex harmonic pattern that resonated through the auditorium. The children who could interpret harmonic communication began laughing and nodding enthusiastically. He's making a joke, Zira explained to those who couldn't understand. He says that before, the facility tried to make all children sound the same note. Now we're allowed to create harmony by being different. Child after child stood up to share their perspectives. Some spoke in Galactic Standard, others in their native languages with translation provided by friends, and some communicated through visual displays, musical patterns, or even interpretive dance. The consistent theme was transformation from feeling like anonymous members of categories to feeling like valued individuals with unique contributions to make. They spoke about friendships that crossed species barriers, about pride in their cultural heritage, and about hope for futures where their individual talents would be appreciated. But it was Dr. Kelvin's who provided the most compelling argument for sharing their methods more broadly. 6 months ago, this facility processed children efficiently, but produced individuals who struggled to form connections outside institutional settings, he said, his logical Hegelian mind presenting the data clearly. Today, we have documented evidence that individual attention and cultural validation produce superior outcomes across every measurable parameter. Dr. Kelvin's activated a comprehensive data display showing placement rates, psychological development scores, educational achievement levels, and follow-up studies of children who had found permanent homes. Most significantly, he continued, children from our facility are not only succeeding in their new environments, they're actively contributing to improved interspecies relations in their communities. They become bridges between cultures because they have learned to value both their own heritage and the diversity of others. Marcus realized that their small experiment in treating children as individuals had implications far beyond childcare. In a galaxy where species often struggled to understand and cooperate with each other, these children were developing the exact skills and perspectives that could help build a more integrated galactic society. After the assembly, Marcus spent hours in his office, preparing his response to the Galactic Council. The decision was actually simple. If their methods could help children throughout the galaxy feel valued and hopeful, he had an obligation to share them. But he also knew that implementation would require more than just policy changes. It would require a fundamental shift in how galactic society viewed the relationship between efficiency and human dignity, between standardization and individual worth. The next morning, Marcus sent his acceptance to Admiral Chun and began preparing for the most important presentation of his life. The Galactic Assembly Chamber was vast beyond imagination, designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of different species, each with unique environmental and physical requirements. Marcus stood at the central presentation platform, surrounded by towering galleries filled with beings whose appearance ranged from crystalline entities that communicated through light patterns to gaseous creatures contained in specialized environmental suits. Admiral Chun had arranged for Marcus to bring 3 companions to the presentation. Dr. Kelvin's to provide scientific analysis, Zira to demonstrate the cultural integration outcomes, and Flux to show the technological adaptations they had developed. The small group looked impossibly tiny in the enormous chamber, but Marcus felt confident in their message. The presentation began with Galactic Council Prime Minister Vexhar, a towering Arcturian whose species was known for their diplomatic skills and impartial judgment. The assembly recognizes Marcus Chun of Earth, presenting innovations in institutional childcare methodology. Marcus had practiced his opening statement hundreds of times, but standing before representatives of nearly every known sapient species in the galaxy, he decided to speak from the heart instead. Honored representatives, he began, his voice amplified by translation systems that converted his words into hundreds of languages and communication methods simultaneously. 7 months ago, I was a janitor cleaning floors in a facility that housed orphaned children from across our galaxy. The children were fed, sheltered, educated, and prepared for placement in adoptive families. By every official metric, the facility was successful. He activated a holographic display showing statistical data from traditional institutional childcare programs. These numbers represent efficient processing of large numbers of displaced children. The systems work well for managing populations and allocating resources. Marcus paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. But there was something missing. The children were surviving, but they weren't thriving. They were being processed as members of species categories rather than being nurtured as individuals with unique personalities, talents, and cultural needs. Zira stepped forward, her iridescent feathers catching the chamber's lighting in beautiful patterns. She had prepared a brief musical presentation that demonstrated how the individual care protocol had affected her development. Her song began with a simple melody representing her arrival at the facility, scared and disconnected from her cultural identity. As the melody developed, it incorporated harmonic elements from other species, showing how she had learned to collaborate and communicate across cultural barriers. The song concluded with a complex, joyful composition that celebrated both her Quillen heritage and her friendships with children from dozens of other species. The effect on the assembly was remarkable. Species that communicated through sound resonated with her musical story. Visual communicators watched her feather patterns shift and flow with the melody. Even species that perceived reality through entirely different sensory modalities seemed to understand the emotional journey she was expressing. When Zira finished, the chamber fell completely silent for several moments, a rare occurrence in the usually bustling assembly. Dr. Kelvins then presented the statistical analysis of their program's outcomes. His Rigelian approach to data provided credibility with species that valued logical reasoning and empirical evidence. Comparative analysis demonstrates superior outcomes across all measured parameters. Dr. Kelvins reported efficiently. Children from our facility show accelerated psychological development, improved social integration capabilities, higher educational achievement levels, and, most significantly, successful placement rates in permanent family situations that exceed galactic averages by 340%. The data displays showed compelling charts and graphs, but Dr. Kelvins made sure to emphasize the qualitative improvements as well. Beyond statistical measures, children demonstrate increased confidence, cultural pride, interspecies communication skills, and capacity for emotional resilience. These factors contribute to their success in forming lasting family bonds and contributing positively to their communities. Representative Thulon of the Centaurian Medical Guild raised a tentacle to request recognition. Dr. Kelvins, your data suggests that individual attention produces better outcomes than standardized care. However, individual attention requires significantly more staff time and resources. How do you address the economic efficiency concerns? Dr. Kelvins had anticipated this question. Analysis indicates that while per-child staff interaction time increases under the individual care protocol, overall program costs remain nearly constant due to reduced need for remedial interventions, decreased staff turnover, and improved facility operations efficiency. He displayed a detailed economic analysis. Children who receive individualized attention require less counseling for behavioral problems, show fewer medical issues related to psychological stress, and achieve educational milestones more quickly. The initial investment in personal attention produces long-term savings across multiple operational categories. Flux then demonstrated the technological innovations that had emerged from their approach. His bioenhancement suit was now far more sophisticated than the original design, incorporating improvements suggested by children from various species who understood the challenges of communication barriers. The collaborative approach to problem-solving produces superior technological solutions. Flux explained through his light pattern communication, with Dr. Kelvins providing audio translation. When children from different species work together on shared challenges, they bring diverse perspectives and innovative approaches that single-species research teams rarely achieve. Flux activated a demonstration showing how bioenhancement technology developed at their facility was now being used throughout the galaxy to help individuals with various communication difficulties. The technology had applications for medical rehabilitation, interspecies diplomacy, and even recreational communication enhancement. The individual care protocol doesn't just help children adapt to existing galactic society, Marcus explained. It helps them develop capabilities that improve galactic society for everyone. Representative Korth of the Vulcan Science Academy spoke next. Mr. Chun, your methodology appears to prioritize emotional development over logical efficiency. How do you reconcile this approach with optimal resource allocation? Marcus had learned enough about Vulcan culture to address this concern directly. Respectfully, Representative Korth, Our approach suggests that emotional development and logical efficiency are not contradictory goals. Children who understand their own cultural identity and individual worth make more logical decisions about their futures. They form more stable relationships, choose career paths that match their capabilities, and contribute more effectively to their communities. He displayed long-term tracking data for children who had been placed in families from their facility. Children who feel valued as individuals don't waste resources searching for identity or struggling with self-worth issues. They focus their energy on productive contributions to society. Dr. Kelvin's added supporting data. Vulcan analysis of our outcomes would likely conclude that individual attention is the most logical approach to childcare, as it produces optimal long-term results with minimal resource waste. The presentation continued for several hours, with representatives from various species asking detailed questions about implementation, scalability, cultural sensitivity, and practical applications. Marcus, Dr. Kelvin's, Zira, and Flux worked together to address each concern, demonstrating the collaborative approach that had become central to their methodology. Representative SSHAL of the Reptilian Coalition raised a particularly challenging question. Mr. Chun, your approach appears to work well for your facility, but how do you ensure cultural authenticity when staff members may not understand the specific traditions and needs of dozens of different species? This was the heart of their innovation, and Marcus was glad to address it directly. We don't expect staff members to become experts in every culture. Instead, we teach children to become ambassadors for their own heritage. We provide them with resources to research and maintain their cultural traditions, and we encourage them to share that knowledge with others. Zira demonstrated this by teaching the assembly a simple Quillen greeting song, showing how cultural exchange could work in multiple directions. Children become teachers as well as students. They maintain their own traditions while learning to appreciate the diversity of others. Dr. Kelvin's provided the scientific framework. This approach leverages the natural learning capabilities of children while building cultural confidence and interspecies communication skills simultaneously. It's more efficient than attempting to train staff in hundreds of different cultural systems. As the presentation concluded, Marcus realized that something unprecedented was happening. The assembly was not just considering their proposal, they were actively collaborating to improve it. Representatives from different species were offering resources, sharing relevant research from their own cultures, and suggesting modifications that could address the specific needs of various galactic regions. The Andromedan delegation offered to establish bioenhancement manufacturing centers to support communication assistance technology. The Quillen Cultural Preservation Society volunteered to create educational resources for maintaining traditional arts and music. The Rigelian Institute proposed developing training programs for implementing individualized care protocols. Prime Minister Vexhar called for a formal vote on implementing the individual care protocol as the standard approach for institutional childcare throughout Galactic Council territories. The voting process took several hours due to the need for translation and cultural consultation among various species, but the final result was overwhelming support. More significantly, the Assembly voted to establish the Galactic Individual Development Initiative, with Marcus serving as the primary coordinator. The program would extend beyond childcare to include medical treatment, education, rehabilitation, and integration services for beings of all ages who needed support. 6 months after the Assembly presentation, Marcus found himself traveling throughout the galaxy, visiting facilities and communities that were implementing variations of the individual care protocol. Each location had adapted the basic principles to match their specific cultural context and population needs, but the core philosophy remained consistent. Every individual deserved attention, respect, and support for their unique identity and capabilities. The results were remarkable. Institutional facilities throughout the galaxy were reporting improved outcomes similar to those Marcus's facility had achieved. But, more importantly, the approach was changing how different species related to each other in general. Communities that implemented individual-focused integration programs saw decreased interspecies conflict and increased collaborative problem-solving. Children who learned to value their own heritage while appreciating diversity grew into adults who could build bridges between different cultures. Marcus received regular communications from humans throughout the galaxy who had been inspired by the program's success to volunteer in their own communities. The Santa Claus tradition had evolved into a galaxy-wide movement of beings choosing to bring joy and support to others, regardless of species or age. But the most meaningful feedback came from the children themselves. Marcus's communication device was filled with messages from former facility residents who had found permanent homes, pursued their dreams, and built meaningful lives. They spoke about feeling confident in their identities, proud of their heritage, and capable of forming deep friendships across species barriers. Zira had been placed with a mixed-species family that included humans who loved music. She was now studying advanced musical composition and had been commissioned to create cultural exchange songs for diplomatic events. Her music helped species understand each other by finding common emotional themes across different cultural expressions. Flux had been adopted by a Rigelian engineer who recognized his technological brilliance. Together, they were developing communication enhancement technologies that were revolutionizing how different species collaborated on complex projects. His bioenhancement innovations were helping thousands of individuals overcome communication barriers throughout the galaxy. Dr. Kelvins had been promoted to head the Rigelian Institute's new Department of Individual Development Sciences. He was training facility administrators from dozens of species in the principles and practices of individualized care. On the first anniversary of their original Christmas celebration, Marcus returned to the facility where it all began. The children had planned a surprise celebration, but not just for Christmas. They had declared it Individual Appreciation Day, a new holiday celebrating the unique worth of every being in the galaxy. The celebration included traditional elements from hundreds of different cultures, but also new traditions that had emerged from their multicultural community. Children performed collaborative artworks that blended different species techniques. They shared fusion foods that combined flavors from various homeworlds. They told stories that wove together mythologies and legends from across the galaxy. But the centerpiece of the celebration was a massive collaborative wish list. Instead of individual desires, the children had written collective hopes for the future of galactic society. They wished for continued cooperation between species, for support systems that helped all beings reach their potential, and for communities where diversity was celebrated rather than merely tolerated. As Marcus read through their collective wishes, he realized that the children had moved beyond simply receiving care to actively shaping the kind of galaxy they wanted to live in. They had become leaders in creating a more compassionate and inclusive society. That evening, as the celebration wound down, Zira approached Marcus with a special gift. It was a new ornament for his collection, but this one was created by children from over 100 different facilities throughout the galaxy. Each had contributed a small element representing their species' artistic traditions, but together they formed a unified piece that was more beautiful than any individual contribution. This is from all the children who have learned that they matter as individuals, Zira explained. You taught us that anyone can choose to be Santa Claus by caring about someone else's dreams. Now children throughout the galaxy are becoming Santa Claus for each other. Marcus held the ornament carefully, feeling the weight of hope and possibility it represented. What had started as one man's decision to care about orphan children had grown into a galactic movement celebrating the worth and potential of every individual being. The Santa Claus tradition had found its way to the stars, carried not by magic or myth, but by the simple human understanding that every child deserved to feel valued, loved, and hopeful for the future. In sharing that understanding across the galaxy, humanity had given perhaps its greatest gift to the wider universe: the knowledge that individual compassion could transform entire civilizations.